George Groves has said that he would be open to a showdown with UFC star Conor McGregor in the future if he decided to step into the octagon. Now, for those of you who don't know, George Groves actually has a background in kickboxing. He was some type of world champion in kickboxing before he took up boxing, or maybe it ran at the same time. Maybe he was kickboxing the same time he was amateur boxing. I'm not sure, but he does have a background in kickboxing, and he was quite successful in kickboxing. And he also practices jiu-jitsu on a regular basis in his spare time. And he's a big fan of UFC and mixed martial arts in general. Personally, I would like to see more crossover fights happening where boxers, prominent fighters, are going into mixed martial arts. I would say vice versa, but I think we've been through this in videos before, and it's pretty much well accepted now that it's damn near impossible for a career-long mixed martial artist to go into the field of boxing and have any real success. When I say career-long, I'm talking about guys who have competed at who come from a wrestling background or a jiu-jitsu background, and they've been competing in mixed martial arts at a top level. For those guys to then go into boxing and try and compete at the top level is damn near impossible. If you don't have the extensive boxing background and you're coming from mixed martial arts all your life, and you're trying to go into boxing when you're late 20s, early 30s or whatever, that is a very tough ask indeed. It would take many years of development for you to get anywhere in boxing. Many years of development. Whereas, according to Ken Shamrock, and I've talked about this previously, Ken Shamrock believes that for a boxer to go into mixed martial arts is easier than for a mixed martial artist, a career-long mixed martial artist, to go into boxing and find success. Because a boxer, according to Ken Shamrock, and remember, this is a very experienced mixed martial artist, one of the greats in MMA. According to him, he says that a boxer going into MMA, he could get by and be fairly successful just learning a good takedown defense. As long as you can defend a takedown and stop people from taking you down, which, according to him, isn't that difficult to learn. It might take a year or two to learn proper takedown defense. Then a boxer could be successful just with his stand-up game. But when it's the reverse and it's a fighter an MMA fighter going into boxing, it's a hell of a lot more difficult. Boxing, just using your hands, is extremely technical. It's so technique based. Unless you're a guy with a huge punch, an outlandish punching power, then, which most people don't have, you're going to struggle. So anyway, without procrastinating too much, let me get to my point. I would like to see George Groves in MMA. Maybe not now, but at some point when he's still got something in the tank as an athlete, I'd like to see him go in MMA and see what he can do. I like these crossover type fights. There's a lot of tribalism in combat sports when it comes to certain people who are loyal to MMA, or certain people who are loyal to boxing, or certain people who are loyal to Thai kickboxing or whatever. Personally, I prefer boxing. That's always been my favorite sport my whole life. But I respect other sports, other combat sports. I don't have this tribal attitude where because I love boxing, it means I have to say that all these other sports are shit. Personally, I don't find them as entertaining, but I respect the fighters in MMA and UFC and Thai boxing and all that. And I'd like to see crossover fights. I was one of those kind of kids who I always wondered who would win out of a fight between a bear and a tiger. Them ones there. That's the kind of kid I was. Who would win out of a great white shark and a killer whale if they really had a fight? So that kind of thing always fascinated me. And you can cross that over into sports, combat sports. What would happen between a kickboxer and a boxer? A Thai kickboxer and a top Thai kickboxer and a top boxer. A top jiu-jitsu guy and a top Thai kickboxer. You get what I'm saying? Those kind of things always fascinated me. So You know, I remember growing up, we would always have discussions about who would win between Mike Tyson and Bruce Lee, stuff like that. And because of that, that's why personally I like this type of stuff. I like boxers crossing over into MMA and vice versa. If there really was an MMA guy good enough with his hands, I'd like to see him cross over into boxing. Now, some people are going to talk about Lucas Brown. Apparently he was in MMA for a while, but he's been in boxing for several years now. Several years. He's been in boxing for what? 5-6 years now? Something like that, Lucas Brown. And he wasn't exactly a top level MMA guy. He came into combat sports late in general. So, you know, he didn't have as many habits to try and shake off as a lot of other guys. Like, for example, you had guys like, even Vitaly Klitschko was a kickboxer, and there are several boxers who are kickboxers. But when you're talking about guys who competed at the very highest level, for example, the guy who knocked Vitaly Klitschko out in kickboxing was a guy called Pele Reed. And yes, he really did knock Vitaly Klitschko out, knocked him out cold with a kick to the head. The fight's on YouTube. Pele Reed was a career-long kickboxer, and he turned to boxing fairly late in his career. And he really couldn't make the transition very well. He ended up getting knocked out a number of times as a professional boxer, Pele Reed. He couldn't get used to only having to use his hands. You know, he was a very good athlete and powerful and all that stuff, but his punch technique just was nowhere near refined enough. His defense was nowhere near refined enough. And then he ended up getting found out quite a few times. So it's difficult the other way around. But either way, anyway, let me stop waffling on here. I like it personally. I know some of you are not going to like it, but regardless of how you feel, let me know what your opinions are in the comment section below about George Groves and this whole MMA situation, Conor McGregor and all that. All right, it's your boy Hatman, I'm out.